a number of people who had gone to England to study there were our friends. So Britain seemed to be the place for us, really. That's in a nutshell.
Yeah. And so then what was the impulse for you when you first kind of formed the PPP with Jessica and others? Like what really drove you to like take that huge kind of revolutionary step?
Well, we were a colony, and in the 1950s, you had China, the Chinese Revolution, 1950. In fact, the Cuban Revolution was around that same period, and the anti-imperialist movement was very strong throughout the world. So we were all part of those linkages. And we went to the Soviet Union, we went to Eastern Europe. I didn't go, but members of the party went there for youth conferences, women's conferences, peace conferences. So our link was, but the PPP was really a many people had different views.
Yep.
We were a nationalist party. Some had international perspectives, but many had just a nationalist perspective. So we had doctors and lawyers, professional people, middle class, and we had left-wingers as well. So it was really like a national party, really. So when Britain came down with that heavy sledgehammer and hit the party, the whole thing split. And of course, there were racial interventions, in fact, because we are a multicultural, multiracial party, multicultural country.
Right.
And that impacted on the whole way in which we operated.
Yeah.
So
you mentioned with the kind of delegates going to the Soviet Union and to China at the time, were they bringing back many of those ideas and that literature, and were you engaging with them?
Ideas and books, yes. We were part of the radical left wing, which would include Marxists. Yes, we had lectures taking place using the books that we brought from the Soviet Union, use as study classes and so on. Yes. And Dr. Jagan, who I wrote about, was regarded as a Marxist and a communist. I wrote a book about him. He was the leader of the People's Progressive Party.
Okay.
He stayed here after independence. Anyway, that's another matter.
Oh yeah.
But yeah.
So were you would you say, influenced by people like Mao as well? Was he quite an influence on you?
Came in very late. It came in very late. Really the Soviet Union, really.
Okay.
Really the Soviet Union. That was another kind of ball game which came into the international spectrum much later on.
So when you then came to Britain in the late 50s, was there part of you that wanted to bring those ideas with you, or was that not really part of your thinking when you first moved here?
Well, we many of or a few of the persons who had returned from after the Second World War, they were members of the British Communist Party, and but we were not. Actually, we had one meeting. We had one meeting. At the British Communist Party office in Farringdon Road. And when it was 9 o'clock at night, they told us they want to close the offices. Now, we had just come from the tropics where we are our own masters, and the night is young, but once you're talking politics, you're going to the morning. And we never went back after that. In fact, we formed our own West Indian Communist Party, but that didn't last long.
How long did that go on for?
It didn't go. It didn't. Not very long. Maybe 3 months, maybe 6 months.
Okay.
Did you have any interaction with Claudia Jones in regards to any of this?
No,
because you met up with Trevor Carter.
Yes, we knew Trevor much more. Yes.
Was he involved in this West Indian Communist Party?
Trevor, no,
Okay.
not Trevor Carter. No. He was a CP man, a British CP man, British CP.
Yeah, because Claudia was
Claudia-
organising quite a lot at that time, wasn't she?
We never saw much. London was traveling from one county, from one place to the other in London was very difficult in those days. And when you lived, we were all tenants living in different parts of London, and she was in the southwest actually, Brixton, southeast and southwest, and we never met her. We met her once at a meeting in Trafalgar Square, but somehow I felt at that time that we knew of her before we left, but she would not have known of us.
Okay.
Yes, but we felt that when we went to the meeting in Trafalgar Square, years later I thought it was a pity herself and Jessica didn't link up together, because they were both women coming from a similar background, but they never did. In fact, they never. But that's one of the historical questions you ask, and why didn't answer. But we never. No. We had our own. Our own agenda. Our agenda. Then we organized with John LaRose and Race Today.
Yeah.
And Claudia and you know, he's dead. This chap who was I've got a book there.
Not Donald Hines.
Hines.
Yeah.
He died. He's burying. Yeah.
He passed away?
He passed away.
When?
Well, he's burying a week today.
Oh, right, okay. I didn't know.
A week today. Yeah. No, yes, we didn't, not very close at all, not close at all. We went to her funeral and we went to the hospital to see her when she was ill. But politically, with a different, we would have sort of trying to find our feet in England then, and organising with other migrants here.
Okay.
In a more direct way. In 1974, of course, the Black Parents Movement was founded in London, in North London. And so that became our base. And then we were here with publishing and so on. So slightly different platforms in the political space, really.
Yeah, well, I guess in relation to that, in what ways did the PPP kind of affect your work here when you came to start organising in Britain, which you seem to do kind of from the get-go as soon as you arrived? You seemed kind of intent to kind of hit the ground running and bring some of those organising skills and Marxist ideas to Britain. How did that, those formative years in the anti-colonial period in Guyana affect your organising here?
It's strange, really. We came from the colonies with a Marxist perspective, but somehow it's like you left home without any consideration of what is the color of your skin, and you became aware that you're black when you came to England. So I can say that for not only myself, but persons like John LaRose, who we met with regularly, would have been Marxist, regardless of ourselves as Marxists in the Caribbean. When we came here, you're black, and therefore the politics and the way in which you view the world changed completely. We never read any more Marxist books when we came here, strange enough. In the colonies, they appeared relevant. Not only appeared, we had nothing else. Here, you had a whole new arena of people coming in from the Caribbean, racism, and the ESN issue, SUS. There were real issues here, which had, in a sense, nothing to do with Marxism. and I haven't read a Marxist book. No, that's not quite true. I read one relatively recently. I wanted to look up for something, but it didn't attract us anymore. It's funny, that wasn't the basis of our ideology anymore.
Were you aware of CLR, James?
Sorry?
CLR, James, did you have any?
We never went to see, they had classes there. No, we didn't. No. We came up with a seasoned, John Rose was active, he founded the party in Trinidad, and activism. I came up, and Jessica came up with active activity and experience. So I didn't even know of it until much later, really. So they were really like students who went to CLR and who were influenced. That's not fully correct. I'm not talking him down. But we were seasoned people with our own point of view. We didn't need a teacher. Our teacher were what was happening on the ground here. With a Marxist outlook, of course. I haven't lost it really, even though I don't preach it. It's the basis of my view of the world.
Yeah. Well, that's the Marxism in action for you, isn't it? You know, you're looking at what's
It's nothing
happening
to replace it.
on the street, right, and what's happening in your community at that time.
Yeah.
So then you said the kind of basis of your organising became around Race Today and a lot of your publishing work. What was it that attracted you to doing that kind of work?
Well, I in Guyana, I was exposed to the PPP newspaper, Thunder. We helped with the printing, we helped with the writing. Well, I helped while I was there. Jessica helped in my absence. Did her own work in the women's movement. So I had imported books when I was in Guyana. Strange enough, that's another story though. But ask me the question again. I've lost track of it.
Yeah. So what kind of drew you to doing the publishing work here, and what was the basis of your activity?
Yes. We met Walter Rodney. When we were living in North London, and we became friends and ideologically very, very close. So that when he went to Jamaica to teach, and he was banned, he sent us the manuscripts which were the speeches he made while in Jamaica, and we published it. So it was our reaction was that here is something, because what the Jamaican government was doing was telling the world that he was a dangerous man. So we thought the world needs to know what was meant that Rodney was a dangerous man, and the best way to show the world what Rodney was like is to publish what he had said. And so the speeches he had made while in Jamaica, we published it under the title of Groundings with My Brothers.
This was in the 60s, was it? Or?
In the 68, 69.
Yeah.
Well, the band was 68, so 69.
So it was really Walter Rodney's work that gave you the first push into publishing.
Yes. Well, we published before that, well, if you call it publishing, a Rastafarian portrait, because we didn't have any money in those days. So the portrait appeared in the Guardian, Manchester Guardian here, and we wrote the woman who had owned it and asked her if she can give us the original. We published it and we sold it to raise funds. So that was and we were the first to publish black cards, cards with black images. So we sold those to give us our because we didn't want to take any money from white people. We want to be self-financing. So Groundings with My Brothers really came out of funds we raised. selling the posters, selling the cards, and we gave parties and to raise funds and so on. So that's how it is.
Yeah, you seem to host quite a few people here and had quite an active social life with the other. You said like kind of migrant diasporas that were in London and organising with them. You speak a little bit more about that and just
Which one?
your interaction with the different kind of migrant diasporas. You said you were kind of organising here with them and also hosting some other people from Guyana who were coming over. Can you speak a little bit about your experience with that?
Who
Yeah, just to clarify your question as well. You mean other migrant groups from other parts of the global south?
Yeah. I think you maybe just mentioned a bit earlier there were some kind of South Asian groups and migrant groups that were part of London, the multicultural sphere here, which you said was a bit different to like other people and how they were organising.
No, I didn't catch that as well.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
It's confusing me too.
Yeah.
It's all right.
Tell us a bit more.
And then some of the other people that you maybe hosted during the time, you mentioned that some other comrades from Guyana would come to London and you would host them here in your house. So were you kind of becoming a bit of a centre point for like a lot of the Caribbean and Guyanese diaspora here when they would first move to London?
Well, I think you might be referring to maybe the book fair. Is it the book fair? The
There's
book
that
fair
as well.
might be the book fair.
Yeah.
Well, we're looking back at 68 at the late 60s.
Yeah.
Where there were 3 black publishers, New Beacon, ourselves, and Margaret Busby. So the three were the main attraction for overseas people's coming. And I would have thought that the fact that Rodney, the riots in Jamaica really uplifted the whole Jamaican scene and Rodney as an international figure. So people who were coming in from this Black Power period, 68, people who were coming in particularly from the States, from Africa. We had the Kiskadee Center, Emerging Arts Center. So there's a sort of grouping not only on political issues, but artistic world and so on. So we became more or less, with some modesty, a sort of center of overseas attraction, if not local attraction, of overseas attraction. And the politics in those days was very left-wing and radical. And everything seemed to have been emerging at that time. You had, Heinemann, many of the mainline publishers had African series, had Caribbean series of books coming out. You had in the music and reggae coming on the scene. You had a whole host of new ideas and different people coming to express them as well. South Africa was taking place. And what happened too is that at the bookshop we became, because generally speaking, what would have happened in those days is that publishers would publish a book and they would sell them, obviously. But we held talks at the bookshop. That was one of the good things about the bookshop, actually. Actually, the bookshop started here, in fact. This very room. Well, How Europe and Groundings was published in Windermere Road, which is not very far from here.
Yeah.
But this is where Jessica sat down. Her chair was here, and books were over there. This is where it all started. So that a lot of overseas people and the International Book Fair, Radical Black and Third World Books, would really coalesce all those persons who knew of us to come with their products and to contribute. We had concerts as well as book selling. We had there's a whole, and people stayed here because we didn't have any hotel fees. Once they paid their fare, we kept them here, we fed them and so on.
That's what I was getting at earlier.
Oh,
when
I
talked
see.
about hosting people.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the bookshop had sessions. We had, when persons come in, They would have drumming sessions. They would have speeches. We launch books at the bookshop, so it became a center really. As a matter of fact, people would in the very early days, employment exchanges and housing agencies, where to get a flat, where to get a job. The police advice centers didn't exist.
Right.
So the bookshop became a center where people can pop in and ask, I'm out of work, do you know any jobs going? Or I don't have anywhere to live, So it became a center of all these little needs which are coming in. Plus, of course, schools started.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why we opened the bookshop, the teachers who were coming here, we had very few titles on that wall, and the teachers who encouraged us, because in the schools there were hardly any books about black people, and the teachers who came here encouraged us to say, why don't you go and bring in more books, bring in books to the schools. And we went when like Easter, whenever at this time now, when the teachers union would have conferences, we would go with and do exhibitions at the teachers conferences.
Right.
With Ananda. There's an Asian booksellers in Southeast London, Anand, and they're still there. Huh?
Yeah.
They still have a bookshop. Anand and Akabit reminded me about their names the other day. Anand and can't remember. But we met up. We had the Commonwealth Institute. Those days we seemed to have a lot of. There weren't many bookshops. They were just coming on the scene. But the Commonwealth Institute in Kensington was a center where you had a lot of exhibitions taking place.
Yes.
And they had, Anand had a shop in the Commonwealth Institute. The Kiskadee Centre came on the scene in North London. So there are a lot of initiatives taking place at the time.
So if I could ask, with all this kind of prolific grassroots organising that you're doing with New Beacon as well, Race Today Collective, I mean, it's really kind of healthy state of community organising. Why did you seem to not decide to start a political movement towards standing for local elections and positions of parliament?
Good question. We were we kept our distance to a large extent from the parties, from the established parties. The Labour Party, the Conservative Party was completely out. If anything at all, it would have been the Labour Party. There's a certain element. We didn't come. Those of us who came from the West Indies were much too radical for the Labour Party, I would have thought. And we never saw them. We would have criticized them at home. So to come here to support them, we would not have. So there was no political party here that we really felt consciously that we can support and work with them. But then you do have what you would call a social democratic kind of point of view from the West Indies and from Africa, which fits in very well with the Labour Party here. So we have to look at not only colour but class. The people who were actively in the anti-colonial movement were people of working class background, or if not of working class, their ideology was certainly working class. but you did have people who fitted in very well with the Labour Party. Which one of the good things about it too is that the majority of black people saw the Labour Party as being the vehicle for change. Nobody would touch the Conservative Party or the Liberal Party. All that has changed and is changing in a remarkable kind of way. That's another story altogether. But I don't know whether I've answered.
So
pull me back a bit.
No, it's okay, because I'm 45 years old. I got involved in the 90s, just as the Walter Rodney Bookshop closes, actually. A few years after that, I could become politically involved. So looking back on the 70s and 80s, I'm like, wow, you guys were really organising prolifically at the grassroots. Why wasn't a political party formed to represent that class struggle that you were involved in? It just, apart from the Black Unity Freedom Party, which I don't think even stood candidates for local election and parliamentary election, why didn't an independent, anti-colonial socialist movement towards electioneering, why did that not materialize? It's not a criticism, it's just an interesting observation.
No. We've never really looked at the reasons for that. So I'm talking without any deliberation in my head, really. But it's a very important question you are asking.
Because you were the leadership.
I
mean,
think,
de facto, we know who was leading. It's very clear. I mean, the Third World Radical Bookfair is an incredible achievement over a decade.
I think there was more political value out of our struggles if we concentrated on issues rather than the school situation, the police harassing persons, specific issues. We didn't see ourselves as being resident here and settled to form a it didn't enter our thoughts.
So that's why you never really thought.
And plus we would have had to contend with a lot more differences and how to deal with it. If it's an issue of sus, you can come together not very easily, much more with less difficulty. It's an issue that you're concerned about. Police harassment, it's an issue. So that was our politics. As a matter of fact, one attempt might have been made coming from the States, and it didn't last very long. Let's see if the Martin Luther King kind of element from the States came over, and they attempted to form like an LCP, like a League of Colored Peoples, but they attempted to form that. Yes. It didn't last. It never got off the ground, as a matter of fact. Never got off the ground.
Did you have any interaction with the British Black Panthers? No,
I was too old. I was again. That was for the youngsters who were born here.
Right.
It came from a different mold, different experience.
Okay. But when did you start working with Linton? Because he had some involvement with the Brixton Panthers.
He's a much younger person.
Yeah.
He's a much younger person.
But he was coming as a young person to your bookshop.
Yes. Well, we published him. And he had sessions at the bookshop. But they're a younger generation, and more or less based in southwest London. And London is a big place too. London is a very big place, and it took me years before I went down to Brixton. Living here in London, it took me years before I went to Brixton on a visit.
Right.
I'm North London, and then West London here, No, we
What music did you and Jessica like?
sorry.
What music? Because I could see your books on reggae over there. You're talking about Linton.
Well, I'm actually writing something on Jessica here for you.
Oh, nice.
I'm writing something here on Jessica for you.
Lovely.
Were those gigs quite important as also a political space? Because you mentioned how musicians are really involved in.
But that's what I'm wondering. I'm wondering what music Eric liked himself. Did you like going to any music event? Because Jar Shaka, he's a Jamaican brother. He's a reggae sound system pioneer. He just died yesterday.
Okay. Yeah.
And so he was really influential to black and Asian working class youth through the 70s and 80s into the 90s. You know, he played at Tudor Rose in Southall.
Yeah.
Anyway, so he passed away just yesterday, so there's been a lot of tributes to him.
Okay.
And he said Jamaican sound system culture was born out of the Black Power movement, he said in an interview,
Yeah.
which is very interesting.
Okay.
So I'm just wondering, just you though, what music did you and Jessica like? Did you like reggae sound system, or were you more into calypso? What kind of things did you like?
That the age group again. The age group. We were married. We had children. We had families. And the people who were attracted to that kind of music and that kind of culture would have been the first generation, our sons, Chauncey and Carl, who would have been at that time 18, 19, 20. They would have been influenced more by reggae. If you're a Jamaican, the influence would have been different because you would have come from. That's where reggae and Rastafarianism was born, more or less, yeah. And so your intake and the way in which you saw reggae and the music would have been different to a Guyanese or to Trinidad. Trinidad had calypso and carnival. In Guyana, well, as a Guyanese now, you're placing me on a spot here. We didn't have. There's no stamp that you can label us and say, in the same way that you can say that Jamaican reggae, Jamaican Rastafarianism, Trinidad and calypso. With Guyana, you could maybe. One person said that we perhaps might have been maybe the most intellectual. That sounds a bit too priggish, isn't it?
That's what Walter Rodney reflected though as well. He reflected on these things, you know.
But I think other people should say that if they think it rather than my saying it. I don't like my saying it. I don't like it.
I think you're allowed to. But you've earned the right to. So they came with. We all came with our own stamp and our own. Even though the islands are all West Indian islands, each island had its own stamp and its own way of looking at things and everything. Guyana is on a continent. It's 83,000 square miles, whereas the other islands are 20,000 square miles, and we are more or less next to Venezuela and Brazil. It's a different ball game altogether.
If there was one or two or three moments in your political life with Jessica that you're most proud of or inspired by, what might they be? Apart from having your children, obviously, and raising them.
I think the commitment really. I think the commitment. Our commitment really. Through all the ups and downs, of one kind or another, she never lost faith. When we were here and we opened it, and we didn't know, we had some books here. Jessica's, as I said to you, her chair. We had a few books over there. And one of the neighbors complained to the council that we were operating a business. and so we had to look for a commercial shop. But the thing is, when that happened, when we had to go to with the council, we had to go and explain why we have a business in a house. And they gave us 6 months to leave here and to look for commercial premises. She didn't regard what she was doing here was the end of the matter because of the attitude of the council. But the opening the shop was another step in the direction that she wanted to go. But can you imagine, after operating into a situation where you can maintain in the house, you can maintain whatever your own expenses are within a shop, because the lights here we will pay, whatever overheads for the shop, we will pay as part of our upkeep. But when you go to a shop, it's a different matter.
Yeah.
And for the first few years it was very difficult, and she didn't look. And fortunately I was able to. I was working in the insurance industry, and I was able to make some contribution, but it was very difficult. But she never lose heart. That is, and very often, and I can see her daughter Akbar with that kind of perseverance and not giving up.
So with that opening of the bookshop and kind of your hand being forced there in that sense, was the project of Black autonomy something that was quite important to you and Jessica? Was that phrase even used?
We use it up to, you mean self-financing?
Yeah, just the general idea of like a kind of a Black autonomy and creating kind of an autonomous space carved out for you and Jessica and your community here in London.
Black self-organisation.
Yeah.
Yes, we kept that going. We kept that going for quite some time, in fact, and in a sense it wasn't difficult. In that we had come from a background of what you call making do.
Okay.
You make do with what you have. And so even though the supporters who were working in offices, government offices or private offices, they brought envelopes for us. They bought staples. They bought all the stationery from their offices, the rubber bands, all the office equipment that some of it really, that they had at their offices, government as well as private. They brought it to give us at the bookshop. Paper, writing paper, notebooks, diaries. So the support came in different forms and so on. But I think that we just managed. We managed. And that is where Jessica would have come in, really, And I stopped working. In '76. I stopped working with insurance, so that we had to keep going with whatever limitation, whatever we could manage here. I think that's a real worthwhile expression, really. You manage. Doing nothing is not an option. That's the book that was published.
Yeah.
Doing nothing was not an option. We didn't do a lot of planning or a lot of introspection. Is that the right word?
Sure. Yeah.
There wasn't time to sit down and talk and to work out. Because now, for example, the situation has changed radically. If you have an idea, the first question they will ask you is, how are you going to manage? Where are you going to get the money from? We never started off like that. once you have an idea, you just went ahead and put it somehow into practice, or to find ways of doing it. It's a different. The arteries in your bloodstream are quite different. It's a different situation.
I think things are changing or have changed a lot. Do you feel that the process, what do you think of the state of decolonization today, and comparing it to your kind of ambitions for anti-colonialism and the decolonization process when you first formed the PPP and moved here as well?
Well, you're asking the question to how old would you say I am now?
I couldn't say. Ageless.
So because if you had asked me this 10 or 15, 20 years ago, the answer would have been different to now.
Okay. You can give me both answers.
So so you're asking a 90-plus person.
Wow, okay.
So when you look back on this interview, maybe 10 years or 15 years from now, you might say that I've sold out. No, I think that when we were younger and active, everything looked possible. In the sense that we made it, we contributed this possibility. Or even if it was by faith, we contributed to it, or belief that it was possible to achieve. Looking back on it now, and we most probably thought that when we were much younger, that the struggle was really like a 100-yard sprint. As you get older, you realize it's a marathon. And it's good that when I look back, we can I don't know whether you've observed this, but there are not very many like myself around anymore. They've all gone, really. Very many. The 80-year-olds now are few and far between. But looking back on it, one can see that the struggle for improvement is a continuous struggle. As a matter of fact, I was reading one of the books that came from Africa, from Walter's Tanzania, and they were expressing a thought of hope and struggle. I'm very surprised that, but mark you, they're 80-year-olds now. Hope and struggle. Now that kind of expression would not have been around 30, 40 years ago. Hope, the whole question of hope wouldn't enter it wouldn't enter our minds at all. Hope and struggle. That is, as you're struggling. As you're struggling to make changes to improvement, you're hoping that at the end of your lifetime, or at the end of whatever targets you set or something, you can show some progress. Now that's a very human way of looking at things, because the forces which are against you, physical forces, climatic forces, personal forces are against you, can hold you back with no uncertain way. And that's where hope and struggle comes in, because everything is not within your remit to take advantage of. Hope and struggle. I don't think I might have been straying there, but I can it's a marathon really. It's a marathon rather than 100 yards, and within our own lifetime of a year, I can see and hear changes taking place, and it's very rapid. It can be there are periods when nothing happens, but then I don't know how to when before an earthquake takes place, the insects are in the bowels of the earth doing its work. And that's where we come in. The insects, activists like yourself and myself, are doing the groundwork. And nobody above the earth can see it very often. Because what they're doing is looking for the volcano, but they're not seeing. And a lot of groundwork has been taking place in various ages, and we're seeing it coming out now. Look what the Manchester Guardian. I don't know if you saw it. The Manchester Guardian has published it. You saw it, huh?
Yes,
you saw it.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is that all the worms and the ants. I'm sorry to give these sort of the worms and the ants, which has been softening the earth and making the earth more malleable for the explosion to come. While that is taking place, hardly anybody notices it. But it's not a miracle. The explosion that comes is not a miracle, because a lot of groundwork has been taking place in the bowels of the earth. But then what people look for is but they don't look. Look at the movement for environmental change, which emerged 2 or 3 years ago. The press and the media came down on them, and most of them were middle class, not people like us, sons and daughters of middle class, but they came down like a ton of bricks on them. 2 or 3 years, not 10 years, not 50 years after, 2 or 3 years after. Look at the environment issues now. The work that they've been doing and other people have been doing are bearing little fruits, bearing little prizes that they're getting. So we need to be aware to give it hope.
Yeah, and talking of hope and insects and soil, is that kind of part of why you want to establish this Jessica Huntley Community Garden? Is that part of this legacy now of kind of bringing hope and bearing fruit for the next generation?
Yes, I think yes. I think it comes out of the pandemic. The pandemic has forced us to, because very often, especially with men. I'm going to slide something in here now. Women talk much more personal and chat with each other. Men very often talk to each other and very often don't listen. Because we all know what the answers are, and women exchange their point of view and talk with each other and chat and gossip much more than. And so one of the things that the pandemic has or ought to have taught us is a bit more time to take things in, to listen to you. Because when I sit here, sometimes I look at the persons walking in the street. They've got their mobile phones, and they're not looking left or right or center. And they've got children there. The children are walking behind them, and sometimes you wonder whose child is that, because the parents are over there and the child is here. So one of the things the pandemic should really remind us that there's a lot more things to life than lots of things we spend doing hardly anything. The human relationships with ourselves, with our families. I was reading of one case where, because of the pandemic, a family lost 5 members of the family through the pandemic. 5 members. Now that could have happened to any one of us, anywhere, anytime. So it's a good reminder of other things to life other than the things we really think is important, really. The environment, the trees, the flowers.
And that space, I mean, maybe even Sukan could speak to this then. That space, do you feel that's a good continuation of the bookshop and what it was trying to achieve with the new community garden? Is that like a fitting legacy for you, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think so, yeah. And Jessica herself loved the flowers, loved the gardens. When we came to the country at first, we were unaware of what the flowers were like, or what the vegetation was like. We didn't know. We know about Shakespeare and about this and about Queen Elizabeth and whatever, but we didn't know anything at all of the flowers, the natural world here. And we kept a lot of the weeds in the gardens. Once they flowered, to us that's fine. It's a flower. But we didn't realize, as far as English are concerned, they're weeds. So we found ourselves keeping a lot of weeds in the garden. So when the English people came to see us, and they said, "Oh, that's a weed, why are you keeping it?" We said, "It's flowering." Yeah, yes.
Did you want to speak about some
No, just I think.
garden as well? and some
No,
of
I think
the
there's
problems?
nothing really needs to be added. I think someone said something. Someone said something nice on the Facebook. West Ealing neighbours, when I put up the advert for the launch. Got a lot of nice responses from our neighbours, and someone just said it's a lovely way to remember Jessica.
Good. Okay.
Just a really simple statement,
Yeah.
but I thought that was quite profound in its own way.
Yeah.
It is a continuation of the legacy,
Yeah.
and it's just a lovely thing.
In the context of London, and maybe even more specifically Ealing, since you're both Ealing boys, kind of pretty much. What relevance to the area do you think it has, and what do you think it does to, in a space like London today, to have this sort of this community garden, which is also pretty much Black and Asian led?
Mm-hmm.
For me, if I may say something,
Mm-hmm.
it's just to put our communities into the centre ground, literally, to put them into the centre ground in a beautiful way, to celebrate that diversity of colour, metaphorically and actually, between people. And in West Ealing, like in every community, gentrification is marginalising people further. So this is about bringing the people at the margins to the centre. So just as simple as that, and whatever are the fruits of that will be what it will be. And that's the beauty of planting collectively, is to see what comes out of it, what the harvest will be. And the process is what the beauty is.
Yeah.
The process is to be a bit more harder and political about it. The process is the class struggle, and what comes out of it will come out of it. We can't predetermine that.
Yeah, true. You mentioned gentrification though, and this is something that we've spoken about before though. A lot of these spaces, these community gardens, end up becoming quite gentrified spaces, and owned by predominantly white people, and that's a whole problem in itself with the idea of within the world of horticulture and community gardening and stuff like that. How do you prevent those spaces falling into the domains of kind of just being another white space, gentrified white space? What do you do to prevent that? I mean, obviously you have some experience of that as well, Eric, even just in maintaining the bookshop for as long as you did.
You okay?
Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Thanks. What was I going to say? I think it's just speaking to what everything Eric has said previously.
Yeah.
In terms of addressing the immediate needs, like in the times that they campaigned around was the racist discrimination in schools, around SEN basically at their time. Also Stop and Search, connected struggles around parenting and raising children. It's leadership. It's leadership around primary issues that impact the grassroots. That's it, really. The other thing I really like what Eric shared before was basically, I'm okay, I've got water, but perhaps Rohan would like some.
I've got some as well.
Okay.
No, just where there's a will, there's a way,
Right.
you know? And it's a little bit, I've been criticised by Suresh in this regard, shooting from the hip, quote unquote, you know, which is a correct criticism,
Yeah.
but it has to be also balanced with the fact that you need to take initiative.
Yeah.
You need to be determined. Don't worry about the budgetary requirements and whatever. There's a need, there's a demand, there's a necessity, act upon it. Doing nothing is not an option.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the process, something will come out of the process, you know. And I think compared to yesteryear, of the time of the kind of the pinnacle of the class struggle around what Eric is sharing, I think relatively now it's the kind of counter opposite. It's be anxious, be divided, second guess yourself, don't do it. It's a bit scary, be fragmented, be alienated,
Yeah.
don't act.
Yeah.
I'm exaggerating to make a point.
No, I accept that, and actually, just thinking, you know, you've both lived in London for so long. I mean, I've kind of come and gone a bit, and obviously I'm much younger, but and London seems to have squashed a lot of that radical activity which was happening in the 70s and 80s, which you've alluded to throughout this conversation. Why haven't the radical communities in London managed to maintain their resistance, and why is it today that there is such an absence of that kind of same radical organising which existed during those time periods? What has changed to make London this kind of quite soulless, divided space?
Because I think you respond to a situation depending on the situation. The situation is constantly moving and shifting over the past 20, 25, 30 years. So the generation, each generation takes its own decisions and assess the situation and response to suit their conditions and what's happening there. So it's not a constant, it's a fluid situation all the time, but there's always that element of struggle. That if you need, sometimes you need magnifying glasses. What I mentioned about the ants and you need magnifying glasses to really but the movement is taking place. You don't people have to live their lives. I hope people have family relationships. They have family responsibilities. And of course, they have responsibilities to the community as a whole. The balancing is that's all part of life. So, I don't know how you're a much younger person than I am. How you would put it, really, you know that.
Yeah, I would concur with everything you said, Eric. To oversimplify things, just for a kind of by means of making a point, I think these smartphone devices are are a major means by which people do not gather in the streets and the communities, especially younger people. It's distraction. It's a form of basic entertainment to keep people occupied. So when August 2011 happened, the BlackBerry Messenger was the communication means by which young people conducted the uprising, and that's changed since then. People are just not in the streets anymore. When you got a smartphone device, you can stay in your home, in your house, and hours can pass. You can just time pass, as we call it, you know, and people are occupied. So what I found that the needs actually are, there's a lot of needs, but when people are reaching out, it's mostly parents around tuition of children in primary schools and secondary schools, actually. It's childcare, it's tuition, because we can't resolve issues of overcrowded housing, which are the other major issue. And then other things you have to campaign around. So the parks and green spaces issue and the racism around that. We have that in Ealing like everywhere else.
Right.
The way the local authorities gentrify Walpole Park and they kind of neglect Dean's Gardens, which is our local park here in West Ealing, which is just all migrants. It's all people from the Middle East and East Africa. And East Europe overwhelmingly use this park, whereas Walpole Park is where the white middle class families use. And so you have this kind of apartheid system of managing green spaces. And that's related to policing as well.
Yeah.
So there's policing to protect Walpole Park. So there's no antisocial activity, quote unquote. So it's all concentrated into Dean's Gardens. You know. Anyway, these are complex issues.
It's important to why the community garden is such a.
Yeah. So to take space as a grassroots organised community is. I mean, we already have an initiative just next door to where we're going to launch the community garden, just the next road on, which is a migrant organised community garden called West Ealing Green Space, WEGS, who are supportive of our project. And just standing there, as I shared with you, you know, it's like a community office. You stand doing something positive in the community, you have a slow trickle of people coming with their problems. Because where else are they going to go? There's nowhere else to go. So you have to be organic, you have to be with the people. Just stand with the people in empathy and solidarity, and conversations would lead to issues because everyone has their issues. You know, for young people it's more complex. I think their time is so taken up, they're so occupied. It's different to when I was young. We organised sound systems, we were in the streets, we were organising parties, we were out and about all the time. It's not quite like that anymore. It's more isolated and fragmented.
Yeah, I was always amazed when I meet students who, you know, going off to university and they still never been to a house party. You know, and they get to 18, 19 and they still never been to one. And it's amazing. I only had.
You put it very well there.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. Somebody once said that the only constant is change. That's the only thing that is constant. Change. And this is what the generational between yourself and yourself here, it shows itself really that your lifestyle, your reaction to the same issues are quite different to this generation here, and vice versa as well. But it doesn't mean to say that struggle isn't taking place, or activities to bring about change isn't taking place. But the type of change you want to bring about and the quality of the struggle is obviously different, really.
You know, I grew up, my dad's library is very interesting, the way it politicized me. He's got some of your books that you published. Andrew Salkley, the Cuba writings. That's in my dad's library in the front room, actually. So and so this whole radical, like, Black and Asian tradition here, my dad was a part of in many different ways. And even if he didn't ever meet Eric, he has Eric and Jessica's work in our home. You know? So this cross-fertilization that happens. But the question is, does that happen today? Are children being raised in homes that have libraries of the Race Today Collective, of Arif Ali's Hansib books,
True.
of New Beacon, and all the rest of it, you know?
Yeah.
And if I suppose you could say virtually that's happening in a way, that young people are spending time online in these kind of political cultures, but that's problematic as well.
Yeah. I don't know how political they are and what they're also being fed. You know, it sometimes feels like there's so much choice out there, but that oversaturation isn't actually helpful. You know, it's alienating people from each other in so many ways. But the last topic of conversation I just really wanted to bring up was about Guyana, really, and just wondering whether you had any thoughts about the direction of Guyana today, how you feel like what's happened to the country, really kind of where is Marxism in Guyana today, and are you still really engaged with politics there?
No, not really, not very closely. My son has just returned from there. They're working on a house there that they're building or improving, really. They spent 2-3 months there working on the house. But we have a situation there where going back to when I was active, and the impact of the British action in 1953, which split the two races together. That's a major issue on that side. It complicates activities, complicates actions, complicates relationships. But the thing is that when you go there, I was there in 2019, I think, 2019, yeah. And you walk on the streets and you see people interacting with each other, and you wouldn't think that people get on very, very, very well, very, very well at a domestic level, at a daily level, as we're doing here. But when the politics comes into it, when the elections comes into it, that's every 5 years or whenever. It has. When I was there in 2019, I would say it has hardly changed people's relationships with each other. When I was there 40, 50 years ago, at the ground level.
It's still the same.
Still the same. I was there when I went, and I went to one of the. I worked in the post office.
Right.
And I went back to the old post office to see what it was like.
Yeah.
And next to the post office was an Indian man. I asked you what's happening, greeted him. He said, what's happening now? You'd think that I'm a villager. You never seen me in my life. Got chatting with him. There were cows passing along the street. And I asked him who it belonged to. It belonged to the estate. I thought it was his cows. The canal, there's a canal alongside the street, and there's no water in it, just lilies. And I said, look, I want to know, why don't you clean the canal so you can get water? He said, no, you got fish living there in the canal, even though you have lilies and little flowers, the fishes are all living there, and I'm getting some of my fish to cook from that same canal that's running right there. He sent his son to pick coconuts for me, and he brought them about 5 or 6 coconuts to give me. Complete stranger. Complete.
Yeah.
Things, the personal relationships with the people on a daily basis hasn't changed, but the political issue every 5 years.
As it said. Would you say, in that sense, that the decolonization process in Guyana has failed?
No, that's a very fatal word to use. Fail.
Yeah, a big word, but
no, it's not a big word. Very fatal. No. It's like a blood pressure chart with things, you know. Blood pressure, it's up and down. It's up and down. Really, it's not. It's not a straight line or one way or the other. For example, people hardly talk about Rodney in Guyana now.
That's a shame.
Hardly, huh?
That's a big shame.
No. It's like a blood pressure chart. It's up and down. They were, at one time, people didn't talk about Garvey here. Nobody talks about Rasta here now. You don't talk about Rasta here. And Garvey, when we came here in the early days, nobody spoke about Garvey. And then suddenly in 1968, 70, and so on, Garvey was the man. So that hope, patience. Once it depends what they're looking for and at what time. They're not looking. It depends on what. Yes, and particularly for the young people, have a look and see where the young people are, and then you'll get to know where they're going. And then when you do find out where they're going, it's not there where they're going somewhere else. The only constant is change. And the faith. How is it we're using these words now? Faith and hope. Something is all right. We never used those words in the past. You see what's happening? Which is a creative way of looking at the issues, looking at ourselves, looking at how we do things, rather than the standard format of what is one way to do it. And we used to fight and kill each other. And when you look back and you ask persons, why did you hit me? Why did you do that? You can't even remember why you did it. So if we can adopt a more human way. I remember I went to one meeting in Brixton in 1982, and the Black Nash, yesterday were there. Yesterday, Darkest How, we all took a class orientation towards issues and so on. The Black nationalists, it was the color of the skin. And there was a friction. We were talking about Stokely Carmichael and certain other characters who went to Africa and behaved in a certain way and so on. And the tension between the two were so strong that I felt if one person had a gun, they would have shot each other in the London streets, in London building. And that's what happened in Grenada. So that if we can find a more humanistic way of relating with each other, it's progress.
I guess that's why we're using words like faith and hope today.
Huh?
Of a humanist tradition then.
Well, I'm even surprising myself because maybe I was moving in that direction and I just needed some confirmation or some help to push me forward.
I'm going to just switch the subject,
I was gonna say,
if that's okay. It's something a little bit connected but totally different. The Irish. What did you think of the Irish struggle when you came here? The struggle of the Irish people, especially in the occupied 6 counties, the Irish freedom fight, because that was all very intense, especially into the 70s and 80s. What did you make of all of that? Did you have any direct relations?
We had our own issues, really.
They weren't invited to the Third World Bookfair, were they?
Not.
Any Irish colleagues?
You mean at the deliberate act? No, it's gone. What do you mean?
To the Third World Radical Bookfair. I don't think you had any Irish guests.
I don't know, but we didn't sit down and say no Irish.
No, of course.
no, we didn't.
Of course not. Yeah.
So it wasn't. If they weren't there, it wasn't. I can't. It never entered our head. It never entered our head to make it an issue where a decision had to be taken. Open.
Yeah, of course.
Open plan, really. Open plan, really. But I haven't. I have a general idea of the Irish question, but not enough to really give an opinion. I would think they can take care of themselves. They got Biden. We don't have a Biden. we don't have a Biden. He leaves America and comes over to Ireland, and he's resolving the issue. It's important to him.
He's not coming to the King's coronation, Biden. All the monarchists are very upset.
He's concerned about power. His American presidency, whatever he's doing, is enhancing. Is either remaining in power or getting into power. That's all they're concerned about. That's a different ball game altogether. We don't have anybody to speak for us.
What you mentioned earlier about Grenada, were you quite well connected with
Where?
Grenada and the new dual
Grenada.
Yeah, were you quite
From a distance, really?
Yeah.
Yes, we knew Cord, we knew Morris Bishop.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Did you know Sandinistas as well? Did you know Sandinistas as well?
Sorry?
In Nicaragua. And Sandinistas.
Nicaragua.
Yeah.
Oh no, just overall, really. No,
Okay.
not really. We were very well. We were much closer to. Well, not close, but when the other not Nicaragua. The other issue, the other major issue in that part of the world, in that part of the world,
Latin America or Caribbean?
Latin America, not part.
Not Cuba.
No.
Cuba, Venezuela.
No, not so far.
Was it Guatemala or Honduras or something then?
No.
It's
Anyway.
not, it's not Nicaragua.
Anyway, but it was the period when my daughter read poetry. What is it? He came over here with Thatcher. Thatcher was in office then, and he came over. We were closer to them. We were closer to them. My memory. My daughter and Andrew Salke read poetry to their festivals here. Can't remember now. Yeah.
They're festivals.
Hmm?
They had a festival.
Yeah. Yes. They were. Yeah. Well, a lot of the emigres who came over were active in the art field. Anyway. Yeah.
Did you have any final questions, Okan?
No, I think we covered.
Covered everything you wanted to. Cool. Should we stop the record actually then?
Yeah.
Yeah, that should be done. I'm just going to take some photos.